Hello everyone, Marco here. So right on the heels of my last video, I wanted to go over a clip of Jordan Peterson in an interview with Jim Jefferies, where he's essentially forced to admit that he's contradicting himself on a particular question, and so he has to backtrack and sort of admit that he has to re-examine his beliefs a little bit. And the question that Jim Jefferies posed to him was essentially this one, should bakers be forced to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple even though it violates their religious beliefs? Jordan Peterson goes, no, I don't think you should be forced to. So follow-up question, should they be forced to bake a cake for a black couple? Jordan Peterson again, trying to be consistent, says no, it's not right, but they should not be forced to. And so Jim Jefferies goes even further and is like, well, what about the civil rights movement of the 1960s? Should restaurants be forced to serve black people? And Jordan Peterson at this point is like, yeah, you know what, that was right. And then the obvious follow-up question is, okay, if you answer yes to this question, why should bakers deny services to gays and black couples? And Jordan Peterson is like, you know what, you're right, perhaps they shouldn't be. Big mistake on my part. And basically what's happening now is the left is kind of having a moment of glee with it. They're saying, hey, this guy took you down in 40 seconds, your whole philosophy is bullshit, you don't know what you're talking about, everything you say is crap. And my answer to that is, okay, the man did something that I respect, which a lot of people don't do, is admit they're wrong. Especially in a position like his, if you're getting in politics in front of the camera, you just don't see it very often. So, kudos on him for that. And second of all, my response to that is that Jordan Peterson, in this instance, what he should have been like is he should have been like, you know what? No, I don't believe in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I don't believe that restaurant owners should be forced to serve black people if they don't want to. And I can hear people gasping already. Oh my God, how can you say that? Are you racist? If you move the camera around in your room right now, are we gonna see a Nazi flag somewhere or something? Let me explain myself. Okay, I'll eventually get to that point, but I want to examine some other points later. Okay, so. First of all, how did Jordan Peterson get into this little conundrum here? And from what I can see is that this is one of the very, very few instances that Jordan Peterson is essentially got really political. And instead of answering one or two questions, he answered like three or four. And so he got a lot deeper into it than he usually does. So what usually happens with a Jordan Peterson interview is he'll get asked a political question, he'll answer it, and then he'll get asked another one, and at that point he goes, hey guys, why are you trying to be so specific with me? I'm a psychologist, I'm not a politician, okay? I want to talk about psychology, but people want to pin me down on politics, this is not my thing, I don't want to get into this. And so it's so trying to debate Jordan Peterson on politics is very frustrating because of that sense, because he just barely dips his toe into it, and then the second you try and pin him on something, he moves right back, right? Cries, no, not me. So I think that's the biggest issue overall. But second of all is, from what I can see from the bits of policy he's given here and there and some of his lectures and whatnot, the problem is that Jordan Peterson is essentially like what I would call a radical centrist, right? People love to say he's right-wing, but nah, he's a centrist. Basically, by that I mean is that sometimes you'll want to use state power in certain areas and not use state power in certain areas. So in this particular example, he wants to use state power to allow to to use the government to force people to obey the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and force restaurant owners not to discriminate on race in schools and workplaces and whatnot. But on the other hand, he doesn't want to use government force to allow the baker to use his right to discriminate against gay couples. So it's kind of a contradictory beliefs. I mean, it's easy to see it's a contradictory beliefs, right? And obviously he hasn't given it a lot of thought because obviously he was stumped on it. He didn't know quite how to deal with that question. And that's the problem with centrism, right? Is that a centrist doesn't really believe in anything firm. He essentially tries to paint himself as a pragmatist, like, hey, I look at the facts, man. That's what I do. I look at the facts, and that's why being in the center is so cool, right? Because I look at the facts, while you guys on the right and the left are just ideologues. You don't look at the facts. Well, that's. You can try and paint it that way, but the other side of the coin is that being in the center, you're exposed to what just happened to you on this issue. You can expose all sorts of contradiction if you just try and lie in the center without an ideology. So I'll leave that at that for now. I could say a lot more, but I don't want this video to be too long. So let's move to what I had said initially in the video, that I don't believe the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is adjusting, and that better position might just be to say, yes, I do believe restaurant owners have a right to discriminate based on race. And that's because, I believe that this issue of baking this cake, and let's pull up this article right here. Basically, instead of trying to frame this issue as a free speech issue, which is what this guy is trying to do on the Weekly Standard, which is an article discussing this issue that Jordan Peterson had on the Jim Jefferies shows, that Jordan Peterson also retweeted. This isn't a free speech issue so much as it's a private property issue, right? So basically, a baker, owns the store. They own the ingredients to the cake. They own the equipment used to make the cake. And private property, my property is my property, and I should be able to use it how I want. And selling a cake to a gay couple, that's an exchange of private property, right? I exchange the cake, which is my property, for some of your property, which will most likely be money. And so that's all it is. It's I don't know why people try and stretch it into a free speech issue. And again, I don't want to make the video long, but you can read the article for yourself, and you can see how the author of it is tying himself into ridiculous knots, trying to make the biggest leaps possible, trying to justify the state intervening with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and then not intervening in the case of bakers baking a cake for gay couples. I mean, it's the argument is way too complex, and if I really dig into it, I can show a bunch of contradictions in that too. So if you want to read the article, go ahead. I think it's a good example of overcomplicating the issue. So getting back to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, I can already hear the biggest objection, right? Same thing, like a restaurant owner, it's his restaurant, the food is his food, it's a private property issue. If he doesn't want to trade his food and his service for a black person's money, I think that's his right. I think people have a right to be racist and bigots. And again, I don't know, I'm really gonna be the most hated person on the internet, because last video I argued for the rights of people to slander and libel, and now I'm arguing for the rights of people to be racist. This is turning out great. So anyway, okay, so where was I? Yes, so it's a private property issue, right? And I can already hear people's biggest objection. It's gonna be like, but Marco, the Civil Rights Act of 64 cured racism, right? America would still be very much more racist today than it would have been without the act. We'd still have black people, riding at the back of the bus, or forced to stand up for white people that asked for a seat, and all types of issues. Still Jim Crow laws with black people not being able to vote and whatnot. So the Civil Rights Act 64 is a good thing. It helped cure racism. And my reply to that is, America is not the only country that has had to deal with slavery, right? Look at Europe, look at Britain especially, used black slaves too, and they don't have nearly the racist problem that America has. I mean, there's a lot of latent racism, a lot of racial tensions. And other countries have solved racism without going to such extremes, So, can you say that the Civil Rights Act is really successful based on the evidence that we see today? And my feeling is that if you try and outlaw racism through law, all it does is it doesn't make it disappear. The racist is suddenly not going to be be convinced that what he's doing is wrong. He's just got to go underground, right? And obviously there's a lot of underground racist movements. I mean, look at now that Trump is president. Yes, I will agree. I don't think Trump is racist per se, but I do think he makes racists feel a lot more comfortable walking out in the open. And so I think that's what happens when you try and sort of legislate against racism. You just drive it underground and make it more insidious. And so what I would have done is, yes, I would apply the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to make sure that the government doesn't discriminate based on race. So, obviously allow integration in the schools, government offices, and public buildings and whatnot, but just leave businesses out of it, right? Because I think we got to realize that it's not really politics that affects culture, it's culture that affects politics, right? Politics will always follow culture. And so once I think the government gets into like integration, racial integration, business is like just a few years behind, right? Accepting the mood. And perhaps if we would have done it that way more peacefully, there wouldn't be the racial tensions in America present today. They wouldn't be as prevalent if the Civil Rights Act of 1964 had gone different. So that's just my quick opinion on that, how I would have handled that issue. That don't frame it as a free speech issue, frame it as a private property issue. And that's all I have to say on those issues for right now. I'll be sure to come back with more Jordan Peterson videos. Hopefully I'll do a positive one talking about his philosophy, because I do find it really interesting and I want to get into it, but every day something else seems to happen that seems to take my attention away. But I guess that's how the internet works. So anyway guys, I'll catch you next time.